Hello and welcome back to Crushing Comics, the show where I fall in love with my comic book collection all over again as I unpack it after it's made its way around the globe from Philadelphia to Wellington, New Zealand. Let's see what we've got here. Do you meditate? Have you ever meditated? I can't do it. I have a lot of trouble turning my brain off and then thinking that that's actually calming. If anything, turning my brain off makes me not zen. I remember I used to be the kind of kid who had to fall asleep with the television on, although I've broken that habit, but I do like to fall asleep to music and things like that. I don't know what it is. I don't like really being in that blank-minded state. I like to achieve a blank mind by doing something. So more than just meditating on a clear mind, I'm somebody who actually prefers to meditate on a thing. I think of something called a Zen koan, which is not something I know a lot about, but it resonates for me because it's a unsolvable question or something paradoxical, which you kind of just turn over in your mind like a little Rubik's Cube, and the focus on that thing might help you achieve relaxation. Sorry if we have any major practitioners of that out there and I've butchered it. I just know it as a very general concept because to me, organization is kind of my Zen koan, coming in here and just mindlessly shifting things around on the shelf, or that feeling of when we all had our comic short boxes and we had to do that thing where we pull one out, we hold the books, then we move them forward, and we drop it back in. That's so relaxing to me. As a kid, I used to take my box of G.I. Joe file cards and just dump them out on the carpet and scatter them around and then re-alphabetize them. Something I did the week of leading up to the new year was organize all of the files on my hard drives. I just really find something really calming about that. It's almost like the trickling of water, the just taking of things and putting them where they're supposed to be, the taxonomy of stuff. Little glimpse into my very strange mind. So if I ever need to relax and I'm freaking out, you can better be sure that I'm down here organizing books on the shelf. Let's see what we've got. Just one book. Oh, hey, this is a real... See, now we're going to hit a lot of X-Men books because we've really unwrapped a remarkable amount of my non-X-Men books. Here we have Fall of the Mutants. Pity we didn't open this first and then Inferno. Then these would make a lot more sense in order. Look at that spine. This really bugs people sometimes, how stretched out that particular Marvel logo is. So Fall of the Mutants, it's a crossover that was not. It's much more like a bannered event in the way that Marvel now will do a bannered period like Dark Reign or Heroic Age or All New or All Different. None of these stories necessarily connected to each other. It was all just about the general fall of all three of the main X-Men titles, Uncanny X-Men, X-Factor, and New Mutants. Now directly before this, as we have talked about, there is a gap. It is one of the only color gaps in Uncanny X-Men to this point. We're all sure it's going to get filled pretty soon. Marvel. And so this is a really big chunk of X-Men. It has 8 issues from Uncanny X-Men, 7 from New Mutants, some crossovers into Incredible Hulk, a Power Pack issue, Daredevil, Fantastic Four, and then also 9 issues of X-Factor. So there's 2 big things happening in here, and they're both pretty significant. One is this beginning of the unraveling of the X-Men team. We saw Mutant Massacre really affect the status quo of Uncanny X-Men because it took some beloved characters off the table, namely Nightcrawler and Kitty Pryde, both of whom are injured, both of whom are shipped out to Muir Island and ultimately become the anchoring members of Excalibur. And so the team also picks up Psylocke, Havoc, and Dazzler in that period just after Mutant Massacre. And so this is a very different team. And also Storm now has her powers back. That's been going on for some time. So it's a slightly different X-Men team, but they're very splintered geographically. And we see that at the beginning of this where Storm is going through some relationship and also some supernatural things with Forge, while the rest of the team is just kind of off doing other stuff. But then they eventually all converge on Forge's office in I forget what city, it's somewhere in Texas, and then face the Freedom Force, who is Mystique's team, that was actually a government contracted superhero team, although really they were quite villainous. It's almost like a prelude to what we see in Thunderbolts. Kind of crazy that Marvel hasn't run with that team in any of the movies, given how popular Mystique is, and it's really one of her main exposures in the comic book. And ultimately in this big throwdown, as I've mentioned several times before, the X-Men are presumed to have died, but really they are whisked off by, I want to say Roma, and made invisible to electronic surveillance. So that's a pretty big story. Here you can see the promo art at the time. Ever the sensationalists. Showing all of the characters just laid out there. Same as the cover, actually. I don't know why I decided to show you the interior version. However, for me, the really standout issues in this book are absolutely, without a question in my mind, the X Factor issues. Because this is where X Factor has their really huge confrontation with Apocalypse, and this is where Archangel comes into play. And Archangel, look, there's a lot of epic things that happen in the X-Men franchise over its life, and especially in this period leading up to the 90s, but you would be hard-pressed to convince me that the conversion of Angel from this like happy-go-lucky flyboy into one of the deadliest X-Men and briefly one of their deadliest enemies, you'd be hard-pressed to convince me that anything tops that. And Louise Simonson makes it work so well. She picks up this X Factor team with issue 6, having had issue 5 drop the hint that there's this villainous Apocalypse in the background that was originally going to be the Owl, okay? This is the ball that Louise Simonson got handed. She was given the Owl and she turned it into Apocalypse, okay? You'd really have to convince me that anybody got a crappier hand going in and left with a better hand coming out. And so over the course of the issues that lead up to Fall of the Mutants, she puts this X-Men team through hell, starting with Angel being effectively crucified by the Wings in Mutant Massacre, and just going through, a horrible period, and ultimately getting converted into a Horseman by Apocalypse. Now, we don't know anything about Apocalypse at this point. This is his first year of appearing in comic books, so the idea that he was taking our Angel and transforming him into something else felt very scary and permanent to the time for us. Things were still pretty permanent in the Marvel Universe, and Jean Grey coming back to star in X Factor notwithstanding, and we had no indication we were ever going to get that fluffy-winged Archangel back. Eventually, we kind of get the fluffy wings back in the, 320s or 330s, but he's never quite the same as he was back at this point, or previous to this point. So, he becomes a Horseman, the team has to fight Apocalypse, and then they have this really major battle with him, with his sentient ship kind of over the Hudson River in New York, and they seemingly defeat him, but really maybe Apocalypse is just leading them to believe that. I've read those issues and I love them. The art, most of it is by Walt Simonson, Louise's husband, who's also an amazing writer of his own right. Of course, he wrote a classic run of Thor, but she was the one who was plotting this. He was just drawing, and he draws these wonderful angular characters. Sometimes it can be a little bit much for me how angular they are. They almost just start to look like they're made out of triangles, but it just makes for such bold, colorful pages like this one of Archangel. And I'm just a big fan. So, this was the biggest X-Men non-omnibus. I mean, it's ridiculous that it doesn't have the omnibus label on it. It was originally solicited as the Fall of the Mutants omnibus. I don't know what Marvel's resistance is to making these omnibuses they're big enough to be omnibuses. It's just their thing. They just like to say that the X-Men books are just oversized hardcovers. So my whole point in saying that was this was $99 when it came out, which was shocking at the time, although Marvel would follow that up with that price point on smaller books in the future for X-Men. If you can get a handle on this, I would say get it. It's also available in trade paperback, and really for me it's all about that X Factor run. The X-Men run is good, but I find some of the beginning issues of it a little on the sleepy side, whereas that X Factor run I can read anytime, any place, repeatedly. So that would be the big reason to get this, but also that it's just this really strong version of art just before X-Men really starts going in that more extreme directions. Before Lee, and I don't even know, do we have Silvestri at this point? No, yes, we do have Silvestri at this point, but it's a very early Silvestri, and he starts doing something very, very different, even in the Inferno era, 2 books after this. So that is the story about X-Men, Fall of the Mutants, and now we are going to give it its ceremonial shelving. I don't even know if there's room for it here on this little X-Men shelf we have going, just barely. Okay. So, tune in next time for more unwrapping. There's still a lot more X-Men books to go and some other books from some other characters too. So please keep watching, and in fact, thank you for watching Crushing Comics.